Hello and welcome. You're listening to CRT Sound System. We've got episode 46 for you, and I'm here with Reese as always. Reese, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Really excited about this one.
Yeah, this is a fun little one that I wasn't really expecting. When you mentioned it a couple of months back, I was like, really? But yeah, I went and had a listen. I was like, oh yeah, this actually slaps. So we're here to talk about some Frogger. So specifically the Frogger and Frogger 2 from the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a bit of a reboot of this series.
Frogger, he's
um,
back in Frogger 2 Swampy's Revenge, sort of a
exactly.
duology in the larger Frogger canon.
Yeah. um, so we've got a guest with us, and it is Boyne returning from our Journey to Silius mini episode for a full episode. Boyne, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for
Fantastic.
coming on. Thanks for taking the time. I'm really excited.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I love Frogger, so I was quite excited about this one.
Well, this was, I suppose, your suggestion initially, I think, to Reese, was it?
hmm Yes.
Yeah, we were hanging out and Boyne tossed on the Frogger soundtrack. And I was like, okay, and I was listening to it and I was like, damn, some of these really slap. As an ongoing theme we're going to be hearing are frog-like bass lines, which was
Yeah.
what I really took to in the first listen to. Um, and then some of them like it'll be a lighter block, but like the Cloud Zone songs especially, I was just like permanent playlist jams
Yeah.
in there. It's really interesting, and the composer's a funny character as well. So I'm excited to go through this.
Oh yeah, you have stuff to talk about with the composer, yeah, because um, it's interesting the link. The one of you sent me a YouTube link to the soundtrack, and the first comment was from one of the composers, basically saying, myself and my co-composer did this, but nobody would know it because this game was impossible to finish, and we're only in the credits at the very end of the game. So I suppose if you want to talk about the actual game itself, like I'm only really familiar with Frogger on a very basic level. So is this pretty much just like a 3D version of the same game, or is it just like is it like a 3D platformer that just happens to have the Frogger license, or what's the deal with this game?
Well, from my experience, it's they keep certain aspects of it.
Hmm.
You're the a lot of the core aspects. The one thing that they drop is the sort of like big bird's eye, or rather frog's eye view of the kind of whole dangerous river and street. But like the first level of He's Back, you're doing the same thing. You're doing the same sort of crossover, but
Yeah.
instead you have to collect all of the baby frogs in a level, and once you collect one, you have to start over. There's a time limit. So it's
Okay.
it's not necessarily like an open world, but there a lot of the levels do have like have kind of like a you have to poke around. Yeah, there was I was playing the cave level with Boyne, and it was totally dark, and you had to like pick up these light bugs and
Hmm.
find where the different five baby frogs were hidden. Um, and so it's a little bit more like that. They do switch it up a little bit. There was like a ice slalom level. There's a couple of other some like complicated like vertical levels and button
Hmm.
pushing platforming levels. So it's definitely got kind of the like they keep a lot of the Frogger mechanics, but it's definitely putting as much PS1 platformer in there as they are legally allowed to.
And still call it Frogger. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. And did you play this at all previous to finding out about it from Boyne, Reese, or was this all?
No, no. I'd be curious to hear about Boyne's experience with PS1 Frogger,
Yes,
because I
absolutely.
was only playing at an emulator the past bit.
I had this game as a kid, so
Okay.
it actually it's quite important to me. but it has the same. It sort of fits in my mind like Bubsy 3D, which is like, unlike Bubsy 3D, it's not a bad game, but it is a weird, port of a 2D classic to 3D, and it's
Mm.
as the composer said, it's incredibly hard and weird. And I've only played the first one, but after this one, they all have different developers, so they all get quite different, and then the lore gets really complicated, as I've learned pretty recently.
Okay, I'm learning that there's Frogger lore now. Okay.
There is absolutely Frogger lore. You don't learn it until the very end of Frogger 1, but he is collecting. You just think you're just collecting frogs, but you find out they're baby frogs and the golden frogs that you use to unlock levels. And if you collect them all, you unlock the good ending, where Frogger and his wife, Ms. Frogger, no, Lily. Sorry, it goes like a raising all of their baby frogs, but they have like a little Frogger crib that all the baby frogs are hanging on, and like projected on the Frogger crib is the like 8-bit retro pixels of the original Frogger, which is horrifying, right? Is it you're just like you have all of your children there and they're in the playpen and you're just showing Band of Brothers or something. It's like a horrible trauma.
That's definitely a weird way to go with it.
One of the later games has a riverboat captain named Slick Willy, and I'm just now getting that. Naming a character Slick Willy in 2001 is quite pointed.
Yeah, that's that is pretty funny. And you'd really only find that in games of this era. It's obviously British, so developed because nobody would say Slick Willy unless they're British.
That one I believe is Konami, actually. The one
I was
with
actually went back to
that
Konami for that
introduces.
one, was it? Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But for me, Slick Willy it'll always be Bill Clinton. So it's like a '90s sort of political reference. I'm not sure what
Oh,
that
yeah.
means for the Brits out there.
Yeah, especially in the South, I feel like the South in the United States, they loved calling him Slick Willy. I
Okay.
remember when I was one of my earliest online memories is that after or while Bill Clinton was running, I logged on to this BBS and they had a like ASCII picture of like Bill Clinton, and it was this be like Slick Willie's gonna take your taxes or something, and it's like a cartoon ASCII of him playing a saxophone. So it definitely was used in America, and
Okay. Very, very different
was incredibly
connotations.
unhinged.
Yeah, I was thinking more of just a wet dick joke, but
Oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry.
no, it's calling a dick a willy is a very British thing. So that's where I was just like, this is clearly something that somebody used to work in Rare used to would do for a Conquer game or something, to call a character Slick Willy. So let me just have a look here. Yeah, so we're going to jump into the first block of tracks, I think, fairly early, because I do want to just play off a bit of some of these, and we can talk about the composers, because I'm interested to hear what you've dug up. So I've got 5 tracks here from the first game, composed by Paul Arnold and Andrew Barnabas. So the first track is Level Select. Then I have Retro Zone 2. Then I have Lily Pad Zone 1 and Lily Pad Zone 2. And then finally we have Leaf Zone 1. I mentioned it when we started playing it, but just the baseline in that level select thing was just like when I turned that on and played it, I was like, okay, we're definitely having to do an episode on this soundtrack.
Yeah,
It just
absolutely.
hits you right in the face. It's such a fun baseline. Um,
Andrew Barnabas, the primary composer. Paul Arnold definitely was a big part of the process, but it seems he was a bit more tech sound effects.
mm,
Certainly, probably making the ribbit noises, which were then pitch shifted.
yeah,
And he describes himself as first and foremost as a funk guy. So it makes sense. Uh, But yeah, just to talk about Andrew Barnabas for a second, I think this
yeah,
dovetails
because I'm
nicely with
interested.
our Commodore 64 episode
Okay.
because he was talking about just like who was his musical heroes, that sort of thing, and he lists like Tim Fallon, Martin Galway, Rob Hubbard, and he was like into the sort of like later era of the Commodore 64 demo scene,
Mm,
and then went on to do a lot of kind of like his did a lot of Amiga stuff before he was a big Amiga composer.
yeah.
Famously, well, not famously, but hilariously, got the had to do a cover of Tommy Talloway's "Cool Spot" soundtrack, and he's a little bit like, I think mine's better. In the interview, he's like, put a lot of interesting flourishes that weren't there before, which makes
Um,
me like him all the more.
to be fair, the Amiga is an absolute fucking beast for music. It's one of the best sounding systems like ever. It's whatever magic they did with that is really really impressive.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean that's the way he talked about it, is that
yeah,
he got Soundtracker on Amiga, and it's really
mm,
sort of like changed his whole life.
yeah. I think like
Being
to
able to
this
work with
day,
it.
people still use Amigas to make like professional grade music. Um, and
I
like
was
you can hook it up to samplers and everything like that. Yeah.
I was watching some like one of those corny like 100 worst Amiga game type videos. And they were talking about like the Amiga World magazine, and they were just like,
Mm,
and they mentioned an episode from like, or an issue from like 2021, and I'm just like, damn, the Amiga people are not fucking giving up.
no,
Uh,
there's still
the Amiga is not dead in the hearts of the the Amiga fandom, so I love that.
yeah.
Uh,
No, it's definitely a scene that's very much alive to this day, which is cool because it's like it's nice when people keep it alive. But like, yeah, soundtracker, like compared to something just like writing the code directly to the game, it still seems like such an arcane and archaic system compared to just like doing whatever you want in Ableton or Logic Pro or whatever.
Also, he's an entry into our extremely British composers.
Mm,
I don't know where Croydon is, but it seems like it's in the most British part of Great Britain.
it's in
But
London, I'm pretty sure.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
And Boyne mentioned before the podcast we would have to dedicate this episode to Margaret Thatcher.
Rest in peace, Queen.
In that article, he talks about knowing how to program as well, and
Mm,
British youth of the 80s, like pretty much being all forced to learn how to operate these BBC micros, and eventually migrating onto Amigas, and just having this
yeah.
insane technical competency that I'm very jealous of. And it's the British government that I've heard you have to thank for it.
To some degree, yeah. But let's not give them too much credit.
No, this episode is dedicated to our Iron Mother. We will all salute her for in a minute of silence now.
All right. That's the shortest minute of all time.
All right.
Um, yeah, no, I'm looking at his back catalog here. Like, yeah, and it starts off with a fair bit of Amiga stuff, including a port of the of Disney's Aladdin as well, which I think had music done by Tommy Tallarico at some point, or somebody Tommy Tallarico is taking credit for.
There's a couple Tommy Tallarico jobs. Also, the game called Global Gladiators. So it's definitely. I don't know. I feel like it's.
Wow.
Maybe it's in my head, but I have such a imagination where like every time, like he's talking about the Global Gladiator soundtrack, and you think like, I may have taken some liberties in converting his bass lines into something far funkier, but Tommy didn't seem to mind, and that doesn't seem like a dig necessarily, but that also seems to be just like,
I
I made
completely
this
forgot
dog
about
shit
Global
my own.
Gladiators. That's the fucking McDonald's game. Oh man, yeah.
I didn't even click on it. Oh my god, that's so
it's the McDonald's game. Me. Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that soundtrack, but I might have to go and listen. Just to compare and contrast. I suspect I'm going to find Andrew Barnabas's stuff to be a lot better. Yeah, because there's definitely a lot of funk. And you mentioned it at the start, but just like you can really hear the funk, even though a lot of it is just them fucking around with a sampler. You know, the bass lines and just the general groove to a lot of these tracks it really, really comes through. But yeah, I think it's probably time to jump into the next block of tracks anyway.
Let's do it.
So again, from Frogger He's Back, we have Machinery Zone 1, Machinery Zone 2, Cloud Zone 1, and Cloud Zone 2 as well. I suppose I picked those two zones there just because I thought they were an interesting contrast.
Yeah.
To sort of the different types of music you get in the game, but also just I like how between the zones, like they have a lot of common elements, and there's sort of you can sort of see how they're riffing on the same themes throughout the different levels. So like Machinery Zone 2 is a lot happier than Machinery Zone 1, but it has like the same basic riff. And like some of the, a lot of the drums and samples are the same, but it just sounds a lot more upbeat.
Mhm.
Like I mentioned during the break as well, like I love the sort of industrial funk sound of Machinery Zone 1, where it's like that early sort of, let's say, industrial and early New Jack Swing drums, that really just give it a lot of swing and a lot of funk to it that I like. And I love how chill Cloud Zone 2 is. Like it really sounds like it wouldn't be out of place on like an Orb record or a chill out compilation for Ibiza or something like that.
Yeah, for an extremely unchill level.
Yeah, looking at the long play of it, it does not look like it would be very enjoyable to play.
Well, kind of similar to the the Monkey Ball episode where it has kids game aesthetics, but like I imagine if you beat this as a child, they recruited you into the Air Force immediately. If your hand-eye coordination is too good.
Yeah,
That second Cloud Zone Airshow Antics is my favorite track. That little those high pitched boops, kind of almost
yeah,
crescendoing. Has like you feel like the frog is close to space, kind of vibe to it. It's really fun. The frog is too high. um, and it's very interesting that it has this kind of through line. Because like when you play the game, like there's a loud like boing sound every time you move a square. So it's
mm,
like it's not totally drowned out, but the goofy sound effects absolutely are mixed higher than the music. So you're not
okay,
like chilling and vibing. It's just
yeah,
kind of like a soundscape to the manic frog hell that you're in. Um, and I think that's sort of like it's an interesting contrast to the gameplay, and it's like it's quite well suited to it.
yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, um, yeah, it seems like such a difficult game. I just I don't have the patience for that anymore. I think it's something that maybe if I had it at the time, I probably would have just been able to get through it just through pure perseverance and time. But I'd love to see a good speed run of it, I think.
I saw a speedrun of it, and it was sort of like the fastest time I could find. And that guy was still fucking up jumps. So
Oh yeah,
there's an evil nature to it, even for the practice. And I think I got at first it seemed a little impenetrable, but you can kind of save your progress,
mm,
even though there's lives, and so it kind of like you just chip away at different parts of it.
yeah,
And just so long as you get each golden frog, then you can marry Miss Frogger and live happily ever
yeah.
after. So
And like, yeah, you've got a time limit as well by the looks of it for each one that you do, which seems quite tough. And then like looking at the sky one in particular, like there's jumps you need to make that like you could only make if you knew in advance that you had to make that jump.
there's an exploratory quality to it where you have to
Mm,
learn the level and learn how to get to each frog and then sort of like the best path for it.
yeah,
In the cave level, there is a kind of like an ice slalom level that's less about you're just cruising down this long path, and sort of like once you figure out the patterns of the spiders and the bats to be able to get to the one at the end,
yeah,
it's sort of easy to sort of like backtrack. um,
yeah. That's
that's the
fair.
one thing I think the second game does a little better, is that there's not a time limit, and you just have to like go through the level and collect each frog, so it's more of a
Mm,
proper collectathon. But I feel like that the limitations on this give it a bit more personality, maybe just because it comes off as quite difficult and quite evil, frankly. But I think that it's a sort of thing that you can that's enjoyable to dig into. And then
Yeah.
once by the end, I felt like I knew that level down pat, and then it's just like, oh, this is my favorite level because I know it. Like
Yeah.
it's insidious.
Yeah, I suppose
You,
that like a lot of these things, if the patterns are consistent, you can always learn them. Um, and then sort of it just becomes about execution then rather than reacting to everything.
I was at, did you run into any extreme sports in the second one?
Not that I saw, no way.
No,
Um,
no.
Just like the intense '90s thing, like Spyro skateboarding, or in this case, Frogger doing like skiing. I
Uh,
think that was the name of the level. But it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
corny. It wasn't corny when Frogger did it. It's done quite well because it's
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
'90s extreme.
yeah, I suppose it's probably a little bit later than that 90s extreme, so it's yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see that. The Frogger 2 has like more of a story, so it's you have to you're more so like going through the haunted house level to free more children, that sort of thing. But that was the only level like that, unfortunately. I did all of the other ones are kind of the more exploratory nature you see in the cloud one. You have to like find the frogs.
Yeah. It doesn't look too different. But there is, yeah, it seems to have some a better camera, if nothing else. Um, yeah, I suppose if you're trying to translate the same basic idea to a 3D platformer, there's really only a couple of ways you can go with it.
Absolutely.
And these the 1 and 2 were developed by different developers, were they?
Yeah, yeah, it looks like it. And there's a different composer, or we haven't quite gotten to the two block yet, but
Yeah.
it seems like since it was Hasbro, they were just sort of there was not a lot of interest in the internal consistency of the art.
I'd imagine not, yeah. And so I suppose with that we'll play the last couple of tracks in Frogger. He's back. I have Cave Zone 1, Sewer Zone 1, Cactus Zone 1, and finally Tropical Zone. I don't think Tropical Zone has a 1 or 2 from what I can tell.
I believe that's a oneer, and
Yeah.
I don't think we're playing the song from it, but I would like everybody to remind everybody one of the names of the level in the sewer zone is Reservoir Frogs, which brought me endless delight.
That's a good pun. Very nice. I really
Excellent.
was taken by surprise with the last one. Just I forgot about all the incredible jungle sounds that they were sampling to augment the music. Let's say.
Yeah, he
Uh,
talks about how excited he was to be able to turn these sample libraries into, to map rhythms over them for the
yeah,
for the sounds of the jungle level. It's very funny.
yeah,
Part of why I really like this soundtrack so much and kind of learning about it with Andrew Barnabas is because it definitely seems like a big culmination to the first half of his career, because he talks so much about how sort of like, he was growing up and he was unable to afford sort of like any more than the technology he had. So
Mm,
he was always sort of like on the hunt for, I don't know exactly what you would call them, like sound fonts or samples or everything. And would
yeah,
just go to like all and would just like engaged in the trading scene, specifically so he could have all the sound files and then just like,
yeah,
rip them off and create his own library, which is which I'm sure was, plenty of people did. But
yeah,
he talks about the transition from the Amiga tracker stuff, just having like Pro Tools and just the full 1995 Sony Studio Suite,
yeah,
and having, and like what a huge kind of like culmination that, or change that was. And he's like, well, it sounded so much better, but still he had to have fun with those samples. He had to
yeah,
like put it in there. And I
yeah,
think the medieval soundtrack still, it's it definitely seems like a new step, the next step. Like he's a lot more comfortable with the technology. He has a new task uh, with what the sound of medieval is supposed to be.
mm,
So I don't know. I think it's a very fun sort of like, flourish for our man here.
yeah.
I don't know, and it's good. The other thing I would like to mention during my little rant here, is the fart sample.
I
This
was
is a game.
literally going to mention it.
It's a game with a fart sample, and it's a lot more present, I think, when you're just listening to the track than in the sewer level. In the sewer level is fucking disgusting. There's like a Geiger noise playing the whole time, and it's just like, the brown and green palettes. There are pretty turd looking slugs walking around. It's pretty fucking gross. So it's like you hear a fart and you're like, of course, why wouldn't there be? So it's a lot less jarring in the game.
Mm.
And I love that he brings it up in both of the interviews I read from him.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention, but also like the thing that jumps out to me with that track, the sewer track, is just like you've got the silly sound effects providing the bass and such, but then they still make the effort to have it be like a really sort of slick funk track, with like the really nice electric pianos on top of it and everything like that. Uh, it's very funny to see that contrast of like, okay, we're being silly, but we're also taking this seriously. Which I think gives this a good sort of a good vibe all over the shop, really.
The other thing I want, did we bring up the Seinfeld connection yet?
You
Um,
mentioned it, I think, during one of the breaks.
Boyne, do you want to elucidate us on the the Seinfeld connection we dug up?
Yeah. I saw that episode live, so it's part of my whole Frogger '90s experience. The first game came out in '97, and then the Frogger episode came out a year later.
Mm,
Um, if you're not familiar, George Costanza is trying to buy a Frogger machine while keeping his high score. Uh, it's not a tie-in. Um, that would have been nice to find out, but they did have to produce a bunch of new copies of the PS1 game in anticipation of
oh,
like
interesting.
all these like I would say early boomers or Gen Xers watching Seinfeld going like,
Mm,
oh, I need to run out and get this new I need to run out and get a copy of Frogger and then buying the PS1 version.
yeah, that makes sense. All right, yeah. The sort of like doing SEO, but in the
Yeah,
90s.
yeah.
Like, oh fuck, Frogger's the hot new thing. We better capitalize on that straight away.
Yeah, and they said it was a huge success. It kept it at the top of the charts until Frogger 2
That's pretty
began
cool.
its downfall into later Frogger games, which are not as well liked as we've discovered.
Hmm. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about two, but yeah, that seems that's going to be the next set of tracks. I did have a little bit of a scan through a long play of it, and it does actually seem a little bit more varied, to be fair. Like the first couple of stages are fairly straightforward, but like, um, you get to the later stages, there's a lot more sort of 3D platforming, even though it's all sort of your character is moving in sort of set, the little block sets that they can move around in. Um, and it's got like power ups and stuff like that, but it does seem a little bit more involved in terms of the platforming.
Mhm.
And it even has a couple of like retro style stages, which seem pretty nice, where they're just sort of very similar to the original game as well.
It feels like it's a bit more robust in the same way that Super Monkey Ball was
Mm,
with its sequel, where they actually kind of filled out the game a bit. It's not just the main menu, and they're just like, here's the levels.
yeah,
That retro level really seems like they're Frogger VR missions,
yeah.
which I enjoyed. I'm noticing here on the art for Frogger 2 that Frogger's wife Lily has blue pigtails, which is not what they look like in the game. It looks like she's wearing like a little bunny hat. And in my head canon, Frogger has a bunny girl wife named Lily, which is transcoded. I'm sorry.
Okay, well that's fair.
That is that's etched in steel.
That's fair enough. Yeah. Can you play as other characters in the first game, or is it just Frogger? Because yeah, it seems you can choose different characters.
Yeah, yeah. In the first one, it's just Frogger. In the
Yeah.
second one, you can be Frogger, you can be Lily, and it seems like there's like a horrible kangaroo creature
I
that's in
saw
the
him. I
mix.
wasn't sure what abomination that was. It's a kangaroo, was it?
Yeah, yeah. I think you can play as one of the babies
Okay.
at some point. Like the plot of Frogger 2 is just Frogger and Lily are just nuzzling up against each other. So semiotically, they're fucking, and uh, Swampy, who is the crocodile from the original Frogger, is so mad at what Frogger did to him by jumping on his back. He decides to kidnap all of his children, and Frogger has like hundreds of children.
Of course, he's a frog.
Um, yeah, but the bag tears open on the way to his lair, and so that's the progression of the levels is you following the trail of your children until you go to the end of the game. There is one of the funniest images I've ever seen. They open up a vault called baby storage to free all of the all of the kids from being turned into
I
like
mean,
Happy
I
Meals.
guess where else would you store the babies? So
I don't know.
we're sort of 2 for 2 on extremely weird villains between this game and Doctor Bad Boon from Monkey Ball 2, who has similarly insane motivations for doing what he does.
100%. I do like the implication that Frogger's journey is one of woe for everybody else. Everybody Frogger crosses paths with is just left like with their
Yeah.
life in shambles, seeking revenge.
We'll jump into the next block of tracks. So it was sort of me that campaigned to put Frogger 2 in this, I think, more than
Mhm.
anything else, just because once I heard Frogger 1, I was like, okay, I'm going to check out Frogger 2 and see what the soundtrack is like in this. Now, the music for this game is done by a completely different composer called Andy Morris, but it still keeps a lot of the same sort of funky style to it. But I actually think it's a lot better than the first game, to be quite honest. Like, there's a lot of really, really good tracks on it. Um, so I selected 3 here from the game. We got 3 more after. So I have the main theme, I have the garden theme, and I have the results theme. Really love the slap bass on that.
Yeah, that bangs.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
lot of really really cool tunes on that. The first track, the thing I wrote down for that was Jet Set Radio, but also weird fart samples. Um, because it definitely gives you a bit of a set radio vibe. But I guess he probably got advice from Andrew Barnabas, maybe to be like, just throw in a few fart samples for the real fans.
Well, I think Arnold Andrew Barnabas is the grandfather of cute funk, and
Mm.
I'm sure that he left a Bible behind where he's just like, listen, I know I'm not composing it, but these are important. It's not cute funk unless it's both adorable and gassy.
Makes sense. And yeah, the composer, as I mentioned, is Andrew Morris or Andy Morris. Doesn't look like he's done a lot of work. Like all for this company, Blitz Games, that did the game to that. So and most of it isn't even credited as music. It's just credited as like sound effects or sound programming or sound engineering. Um, so I don't know how much other music he's actually composed, but I feel like we've missed out by not having him do more music. Because
I couldn't find anything.
yeah, there's very little information on this guy anywhere.
Andrew Barnabas what he thought of the Frogger 2 soundtrack, and he's like, didn't see it.
Uh,
So I don't know.
yeah,
No extra insight other than it bangs.
yeah. Um,
There's an Andy Morris VA who's been in a bunch of stuff, but it's very difficult to figure out if that's the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know who the voice actor would be, but um,
He was in Psychonauts, so he's done like a lot of games and what sounds like British games. But I'm not
okay.
sure if Frogger 2 was a British studio.
Yeah, it looks like it was a British studio, Blitz Games.
Okay.
It seems to be based in the UK. Probably the biggest name I'm seeing here is Disney's Epic Mickey 2: The Power of Two. So I don't know what they did on that, but
Oh, he did Glover. Andrew Morris did Glover and all the Harry Potter games.
Oh
okay.
goodness.
Yeah.
It's strange because those aren't listed on. Or Glover is there right at the bottom. Um, yeah, additional PlayStation music and sound effects. Yeah. Oh yeah, and there's the Harry Potters. Yeah, so they're all credited as audio programming, which I'm never sure when I'm sort of looking into these what audio programming means, like in real terms. Um, like I know what it means specifically, but does that mean that he was composing the music, or does it mean that he was just sort of in the studio getting things set up and stuff like that? It's hard to say, really.
Yeah, it definitely seems like if not composer, if it's not listed as composer, it just there's some vague in the room or new part of the technology.
Yeah,
It's tough to say. Like Peter Murphy is credited on the Frogger He's Back soundtrack.
yeah,
But Andrew Barnabas is just like, yeah, I mean, he's just my manager. Like he just
yeah,
gave me notes. And but he's credited as one of the composers, so
yeah.
shrug.
Yeah, and so even in Andrew Barnabas's like YouTube messages, he's like, "Oh, just me. It was just me and Paul Arnold. Like there was, it was just the two of us." So like, yeah, I'd be more inclined to take that over the credits, but sometimes all we have to go on is the credits, especially with somebody like Andy Morris here, who's like, yeah, um, doesn't have a lot to his name. Like the last game that was even released, with his credit on it is in 2009, which is a good while ago now. Too far back for my liking.
He worked on Fusion Frenzy. Okay,
Yeah,
so he is a legend.
Fusion
It,
Frenzy was a great game.
uh, I'm surprised they didn't bring him back for the extra transphobic Harry Potter game. You would think they would want to bring back some of the talent. But I don't know. I guess there's just no loyalty there in the UK.
No loyalty there when it comes to transphobia.
I can't. I've been trying to remember the name of it, the new one, to speak of it by name, but I can't even remember
Hogwarts Legacy, I think.
that's such a generic title.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
I think on video games are the worst thing on earth. I called it Hogmonger's Legacy and did not even realize I was doing a bit.
I mean, Hogmonger's Legacy, that sounds way more interesting. We'll jump into the last block of tracks here. So they just got three more from Frogger to Swampy's Revenge, and I really gotta say, Swampy's Revenge is such a funny title for anything. Like, it's like the phrase "swampy" is there's a lot of connotations. But yeah, we've got
To me, it was really Chef's kiss that it's revenge for Frogger jumping on his back.
yeah.
It's just like he's like, "Fuck you, buddy. Fuck your whole family."
Fuck you for trying to get home.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, we've got Ancients theme, Laboratory theme, and Subterranean theme. I was sort of in a reverie after that one myself there. So the thing that really jumps out to me about the Frogger 2 soundtrack over the Frogger 1 is like where the Frogger 1 soundtrack, you definitely have that sort of funk and disco sound to it. Is you can really sort of like hear a lot of the big beat and break beat of the 90s in those tracks from Frogger 2, which I really really enjoy because that's one of my favorite eras of music.
Nice. It's a lot more fast paced. Like the Frogger
Mm,
One soundtrack is very languid. Uh,
yeah.
Especially considering what you're doing. And Frogger Two is not necessarily slow paced, but it's less frenetic. I think a lot
Mm,
of the time, there is it doesn't quite have the same time limit stuff, so I think that's interesting. He mentioned that the first track he did was too fast for Frogger One, so I'm curious. I guess there was
mm,
just this expectation that Frogger was a slower vibe,
yeah.
but I do really like the sort of like up tempo nature of it, and it's definitely um I think that there is a bit more polish to the Frogger 2 soundtrack. But I
Yeah.
love the vibe of the Frogger 1 soundtrack so
Yeah.
much that I think it's by far my favorite. Just the and I feel like it's taking a page from Frogger 1 um on some level. Even subconsciously he listened the Andy Morris listened to the soundtrack and was just like, yeah, all right, we have to continue the cute funk.
Yeah, I don't think there was it doesn't feel out of line with what they were doing in Frogger One,
Hmm.
which did surprise me when I sort of listened to it and just discovered that it was a completely different composer from a completely different company.
Hmm.
But as you say, yeah, there's probably a sense that he went and listened to the first soundtrack at least and was like, okay, I've got to try and do something that's commensurate with that in some way.
Boyne, you've discovered an extensive Frogger modding scene. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about that for a second?
Yeah, it looks like there's level editors um and like character editors. And not only do they work for Frogger, but they work for some of the other games we've mentioned, like Medieval, like
Hmm.
other games from this studio. You know, you've got an in-house engine like you did in those days, and then you build all your games with it. And they're
Yeah,
tweaked slightly for each game because very different gameplay, but it's not like now where everything's Unity
yeah.
or Unreal. So I'm quite excited to dive more into that.
Yeah, it does look quite interesting. I'm sort of skipping through that video you posted, and I'll include it in the link, include a link to it in the show notes. But yeah, like I mentioned it in the Red Alert episode, but just I really love, and it's one of my favorite things about the internet is that like for so many niche things where there's only maybe like a couple of dozen people that are really into it, there's still people out there who are just willingly put in the time and effort to actually get these things up and running for other people. Um, and just seeing people do that, even for stuff that I'm probably never going to actually experience myself, it just brings me a lot of joy to see.
So that last song I want to mention, this game came out at the height of the Smash Mouth uh, fame, and
Yeah,
it does really have
the
that
piano
kind of
in it is,
vibe.
yeah, it does have that, yeah, that sort of semi-acoustic or semi-electric piano sound. I don't know uh, what that piano sound specifically is. I'm sure somebody knows that can correct me, but yeah, you definitely get that lounge revival sound to it. That's not something I thought about until you actually mentioned it. But yeah, now that you bring it up, you can definitely hear it. But yeah, I think with that we're gonna finish up tonight. I think
Yeah. I think we have
we've plumbed the
explored.
depths of Frogger. I think as much as
Yeah,
anybody
only the
really
only
can
people who have plumbed it deeper are the
of the
creators of the
modders.
level editors. Yeah,
Yeah,
and we need more research before we can comment on that.
yeah. These soundtracks are basically impossible to find except for on YouTube, or if you know where to get rips of PlayStation music. So I would, jump on YouTube if you want to listen to the rest of these soundtracks. There's a lot of really, really good stuff across both of them. And Boyne, thank you again so much for joining us. It was real fun to have you on again for a more full episode. Have you anything you want to plug? Anything you got going on at the moment?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I've got nothing to plug, but you can follow my Twitter at BoinSoft. That's BOIN soft. So, it's technology. I'm tweeting about the modding, Frogger modding stuff now just because we're doing the episode and that's my, today's hyperfixation.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time, Boyne. It's very
really fun.
exciting, press gang and go into another episode. So
No, I'm happy to be here.
Nice. All right. Reese, anything else you got going on at the moment?
you can check me out at Reese V Writer on Twitter, and what's the other one? Blue Sky. And you can check out Existential Warfare, my personal podcast, and Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth, my mentally ill leftist podcast.
And as for ourselves, we can be found CRT Sound System on Blue Sky, CRT Pod System on Twitter. You can go to patreon.com/CRT Sound System if you want to support us on Patreon. You can get free episodes, free bonus episodes for everybody, and anybody who is a subscriber then will get the bonus episodes plus higher bitrate downloads for this for all the episodes. I think apart from maybe 2, I was able to get the higher bitrate because I accidentally deleted the Audacity files for 2 of them. But and I didn't feel like re-editing them. But apart from that, pretty much everything is in a higher bitrate on the Patreon. You can also check out our Linktree CRT Sound System on there, and also join our Discord.
Yeah, where you can join the Discord where we will then make you come on the podcast. It's a good deal.
You will be DM'd to tell me what game you want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I still want to come up with some unhinged Patreon only project. Maybe a deep dive reviewing every song Tommy Talrico has ever done. Every episode is an hour-long discussion about a different Tommy Talrico song. We'll see.
I wouldn't hold your breath on that.
I'll talk to Tom. Don't worry. Hold your breath.
So thank you so much again, Boyne, and I will leave you from another track from the Frogger 1 soundtrack. This one is just called Unused Track. So thank you so much for listening. Have a good one.
Bye.